Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are at the start of the 2042 to 2043 offseason, and in this episode, we're going to take a look in depth at our minor league system, some of the top prospects we have in our organization, as well as some former players, and see in retrospect whether we moved on from some guys too early or whether our timing was impeccable. Got a number of arbitration eligible players. I think that we're likely to make offers to most of them when all is said and done. Also have a big crop of pending free agents. Right now we've penciled in qualifying offers to Alexis Mendoza and Juan Romero. Still potential for a reunion with one or both of them, but I don't think the odds are particularly high. As we talked about at the end of our last episode, we did decline our $16 million option on Deshaun Seifu earlier today, and we subsequently made him a 3-year offer that he is contemplating right now at less money. Also have several free agents without compensation hitting the market. So this roster is going to turn over pretty significantly this coming offseason. And because of that, it's pretty important to ensure that our farm system is chugging along and producing well. Last year we had $18.5 million in our scouting budget, $39 million in our player development budget, so pretty strong figures in both of those to help the recruiting and development of those players that we draft and find and recruit and sign. Have placeholders in for somewhat less next season, just to give us some money to play around with as we approach free agency. In a perfect world, we'd like those numbers to be closer to where they were this past season than where they are penciled in right now. But we will see how the postseason plays out before making those decisions. Also touched in our last episode about the number of coaches we had retire throughout our organization, and you can see in the minors right now we have 2 hitting coach and 4 pitching coach offers outstanding, so a lot of work to do there to replenish our coaching staff. No major league openings at this point. We made I don't think it's a very interesting move. It was kind of a obvious move in retrospect, but Brian Triplett, who had been our hitting coach in our rookie league team for 3 years, but he's legendary at teaching hitting, legendary at development, outstanding at mechanics, and excellent at aging, had requested a promotion, and we did not have any openings at a level that would be a promotion for him coming out of rookie ball to be a hitting coach, except for our major league opening. And it's not a perfect solution because with that legendary development and outstanding mechanics, he was a guy that we loved to have at our rookie ball team to really let those new draftees get a real good boost on their development. But he's also a great coach. He fit in well with our major league team personality-wise. So a rookie league to major league hitting coach promotion for Triplett. His relationships at the major league are only expected to be average, but better relationships with the hitters that he's going to be working with and weaker relationships with the pitchers where it doesn't matter so much. So would have loved a guy with that talent set to be able to get a hold of our most raw prospects and work with them for a year, 2, sometimes 2.5 years in rookie ball, but also didn't want to risk losing a coach that talented from our organization entirely since he was requesting a promotion. So we gave him the biggest promotion possible from rookie ball hitting coach to major league hitting coach. And we'll see in the coming days as we wait on Seifu's contract and his ultimate response. We'll wait and see what happens with those 6 coaching openings that we have in the minor leagues as well. I'm sure there will be some negotiations and back and forth involved there before we can fill all 6 of those positions. So, turning to one of the primary goals of this episode, which is to determine what our farm system looks like and refresh you on some of our top prospects, you can see we're still middle of the pack, ranked 15th out of 32 overall. But as we get through the players, you'll see it's an interesting dynamic. We've only got one top 50 prospect, but we have a bunch of prospects in the top 200. So, although we don't have the same frontline, can't miss, allegedly, top line prospects as some other teams. Overall, our depth is not that bad for a team that's been picking at the end of the first round for the better part of a decade and a half at this point. Top prospect in our system remains Juan Toledo, international free agent signing from closing in on 4 years ago. Just completed a third year in rookie ball, and I guess he made some progress, got his WRC plus up to 88, so that's the most effective he's ever been. Batting average only 153, though, in 99 strikeouts and 157 at-bats. His avoid strikeout rating is not good, and even when you look at it relative to the Dominican Rookie League, seems like he's getting close to being able to hold his own in most categories, but the number of strikeouts from Mr. Toledo is still potentially frightening, unfortunately. Did finally change my settings last offseason to start limiting the experience levels of players in rookie ball, A ball, and high A ball. So that should, over time, let these leagues be more what they're really intended for with the youngest prospects, which hopefully going forward will help with the statistical results put forth by prospects of Toledo when they're competing mostly against players that are their own age. Making that change during the season, or not really during the season, but during the playthrough, I did notice that players who were sitting at that level that don't meet the criteria were kind of grandfathered in. So if there was a 30-year-old with 12 years of professional experience in rookie ball, at least in this sim, you are allowed to keep that player there. The issue is that you can't move them anywhere. You can't move them to the other rookie ball teams. You can't move them to A. You can't move them to high A. You could move them to double A or triple A because I don't have experience restrictions in at those levels. But for those who are wondering, it looks like if you change the experience time frame for the lower minor leagues in the midst of a playthrough, the players who no longer meet those criteria seem to be grandfathered in so they can stay with the team that they were in until eventually you cut them, they become a free agent, or they retire. So we haven't perfectly solved the issue of more experienced players dominating those levels, but I think over the next couple of years, the last few holdovers will likely age out and it'll become more as intended. So we're still hopeful that Toledo will become a big-time player. Probably will be in A-ball this upcoming season. 20 years old, it's time to see what he can do against a different level of competition. As I noted, the big concern with him is just how often he's going to strike out. Thus far, he has struck out at an insane rate across 3 years in professional baseball. Solano Toselli, left-handed international free agent signing from almost 5 years ago, the number 61 prospect in baseball, 10-10 record with a 3.76 ERA and high A ball this past year at 22 years old. Would think he's a likely candidate for promotion to Double A next year and probably will be seen in the majors late next season or more likely sometime in 2044. Juan Ramirez, we talked about in our last episode, international free agent out of Cuba. We picked up last year, split the year between AA and AAA before coming up for a cup of coffee in September. He is in the mix to certainly be on the major league roster next year. The big question is whether he'll be our starter or a backup to one of the two catchers currently on the team, Houlihan and Miller. And our last top 100 prospect, Ezekiel Salazar. He was our top-rated international free agent signing this past January. Just turned 17 over the summer. Has not started playing professional ball yet. He is still at our international complex. Turning into the large number of prospects we have ranked between 100th and 200th, Chris Lott is a guy that we've talked about a lot the last couple of seasons. First round pick in 2037, 12-5 with a 4.62 ERA at AAA Albany this year. He was in line for a promotion to the majors in September. Unfortunately, on August 4th, he was diagnosed with a herniated disc. Basically missed the rest of the season at that point. So in the mix to be on the major league roster next year out of spring training. If he doesn't make the team out of spring training, we would think that at some point he will certainly be making his major league debut in 2043. Jeff Frikowiak, you may remember we picked him with our first round pick in 2039 in a bit of a controversial decision with viewers over Gregorio Garola. We ended up getting Garola in the second round anyways, so it all worked out. Frikowiak is a guy who's had some horrible injury issues over the first 4 years of his professional career. First 3 years of his career, 39, 40, and 41, combined for just 11 games pitched in rookie ball. Had an injury that caused him to miss most of 2040 and all of 2041. Given that he was 21 years old as of the start of this past season, we promoted him to A-ball, 7-6 with a 4.62 ERA, so he was more effective there than he had been in rookie ball. He's already fragile as far as his injury proneness, kind of looking at what our scout thinks about him. It's a bit of a dream right now to think he's going to be a frontline starting pitcher. Looks more like a guy who could be a 3, 4, or 5 pitcher for us in the rotation. We'll see if we can keep him healthy and keep developing. He does have high work ethic, good intelligence. Not a perfect personality, though, with the low leadership and loyalty. Would think he'll probably start the year in high A ball and conceivably could get promoted to Double A at some point next year. Vince Perloff, another starting pitching prospect we picked in the third round of that 2039 draft. He split the year between A-ball, where he was 7-1, and high A-ball, where he was 5-2. Looks like he's probably a back end of the rotation type of starter, maybe a guy who could give us some bullpen depth. He is durable, throws pretty hard, ground ball tendencies, good stamina. There's some things to like about Perloff, but don't view him as being a frontline prospect at this point in his development. Danny Black, a guy we picked in the first round a year ago in 2041, and he was 2-4 with a 6.58 ERA this year as a 19-year-old in rookie ball. Like his durability, good stamina, solid at holding on runners. You look at his ratings relative to the FCL, and other than his stuff, he should be pretty successful at that level. Now, clearly his stuff is the most important thing for him to develop. So hopefully he'll be able to progress to A-ball eventually next year. I tend to think we'll probably start him out in rookie ball, give him a few weeks there, and then when the next crop of draftees starts to get signed, hopefully be able to promote him up to single A and see what he can do there. Willard Vokey, a guy we talked about in our last episode, picked him up in the trade with the Angels where we sent away Damani Hainsworth right at the start of this season. Dominant in AAA, didn't do much in a very small sample size with the major league team. Looks like he could be a useful bat. Doesn't bring anything to the table on the base paths or bunting wise or defensively, but think he could be in the mix to be a backup first baseman / corner outfielder / right-handed pinch hitter off our bench for the next few seasons. Once he starts making anything more than the league minimum, probably a guy that we move on from. Eric Fisher, second round draft pick in 2038, another starting pitching prospect, split the year between high A marathon where he was 7-5, and then high A Jamestown, where he had no decisions in 4 games pitched, put up a 5.31 ERA. Control has been his issue, walked 82 batters last year between the two levels. Best case scenario for him seems to be a guy who could help as a back end of the bullpen kind of player who could start for us in a pinch. Another pitcher, Joey Bills, 6th round pick in 2040. 3-0 with a 5.79 ERA in a relatively small sample size in rookie ball this year. He's almost 21 years old. Probably going to be time to promote him to A ball this upcoming year. But realistically, he's borderline ready for that level. But just given his age and the fact we'll have a new crop of draft picks coming in to rookie ball, he will probably be moved up relatively early next year. And our final top 200 prospect, another pitcher, Jim Coles, supplemental 1st round pick for us in 2041 out of Louisiana Tech. Spent last year at 3 levels, was 10-1 with a 2.69 ERA in single A, 8-0 with a 3.55 ERA in high A ball, and then we promoted him to Double A Utica at the end of the year, where he was 1-1 with a relatively gross 7.83 ERA. Guy who's not too far off from being able to help in the majors. Looks like he's more of a back of the rotation kind of guy, but does have a pretty diverse arsenal of good pitches, real nice personality traits. A guy who can win 19 games, a 19-2 record across 3 levels in the minors, is a rarity in this day and age. He's got pretty good stamina, and he went out there and he started 27 games across those 3 levels. Probably will start in Double A, but would think that he'll get some action in Triple A next year, and conceivably could be in the mix to be a September call-up for us when we get to that point about 10 months from now. See if there's any other players that we want to check in on. One very notable, Danny Ferguson, the shortstop who was our 1st round pick this last year, played in 3 different levels, hit 306 in rookie ball. We expected he'd be good there as a 21-year-old coming out of college. He wasn't particularly strong offensively in A ball, hit 245 and 106 at-bats. Given that he's almost 22 years old, though, we wanted to see him at another level, so we still promoted him up to high A ball at the end of the year. Hit 231 and 39 at-bats there. Looking at his ratings relative to the South Atlantic League, he seems like he's ready to handle that level. The number of strikeouts still likely to be an issue. Still like his potential ability to play multiple defensive positions. Do worry a little bit that he's going to ultimately fit in a similar box as a lot of the middle infielders we have right now. Good defensively, but not great, and a bat that is acceptable, but not good. The hope is with Ferguson's strong work ethic and some good coaching, does seem like if he maxes out his skills, his bat is a little higher end than most of our other middle infielders, which should make him a valuable player. Probably will start next year in high A ball or Double A. Would think that we'll try to get him up to Triple A before the end of the year. And if things go well, he could be a September call-up for us next year too. John Wisniewski, another guy to talk about, a 1st-round reliever from 2041, has had a relatively rough start to his career in rookie ball, had some injury issues this year, and played only 4 games. Ulnar nerve entrapment that he had in late June when the season was just getting going cost him his season. Looks like he's still normal injury proneness right now. The left-hander, when we look at him relative to the FCL, he's only going to be, he'll be 20 by the time the rookie league season start next year. I think the goal would be to let him pitch for a month or so in rookie ball, and then hopefully get him to A ball at some point to stretch out the length of his season on the back end. A lot of other players, we're not going to talk about them all, but feel pretty good where we are as a minor league organization. We're heavy on the pitchers with the big investment we've made into drafting pitching and signing international amateur free agents who are pitchers in recent years. So all else being equal, would love to lean a little bit towards hitters in IAFA or the draft this upcoming year, but we're generally of the opinion that we take the best talent on the board regardless of position, given that most of these guys that we're drafting or picking up as international amateur free agents, it's going to be 5, 6, 7 years till they'll potentially be making a mark on the major league roster. So who knows what our team is going to look like in closing in on 2050. Turning our attention now to some prospects that aren't in our organization. Some of these are former players of ours. Most of them are players that we thought looked interesting in the draft, or some of you thought looked interesting in the comments, and we've decided to track them over time. Luis Centino, still a pretty high-end pitching prospect. He was picked 34th this past year. We had thought about him with our pick, our first-round pick, and ended up passing on Centino when we went with the shortstop Ferguson. Didn't think Centino was going to be there for us in the second round. Hoped he might. 1-2 with a 6.21 ERA in his introduction to professional baseball as a 17-year-old. Still looks like he's got high-end potential. Mike James, starting pitcher who was picked in the 5th round in 2042, this past draft. This is a guy who we were ready to take in the 6th round, and we thought he might continue to draft. A real interesting prospect. Is a pitcher, he's kind of meh. Did end up getting promoted because he was a college player to A-ball this year, where he was 2-4 with a 6.21 ERA. The thing that we liked about him, he has the ability to just eat some innings for your bullpen. I don't think he's a big-time pitcher, but could be someone to save your better pitchers. And he's also a potential two-way player. Now, I question whether he's ever going to hit enough to be a real useful major leaguer. But his defensive versatility and his defensive ability with 70 infield range and 70 outfield range is what really intrigued me. It's not a role that I can think of ever having happened in baseball, but a guy who is a potentially excellent defensive substitution who can probably upgrade almost any defensive position that you need, while also pitching out of your bullpen, or perhaps even being a 5th starter, is kind of a unique combination. Still a guy that I may try to trade for down the line, just because I think it would be interesting to see whether you could actually execute on getting some value out of a player like that. Phil Mullen, a guy who we looked at last year's draft, ended up passing on him with our first pick, and then he wasn't around by the time we had our next pick. 1-2 in rookie ball with a 3.96 ERA this year. Still looks like a pretty interesting prospect. Jorge Rente, an international free agent signing from back in 2036. 7-12 in the majors with a 4.93 ERA this year for Montreal. Still looks like he could be a pretty solid major league starter, but the milkman probably not as high-end a starter as we may have thought and hoped when we were looking at him as an IAFA. Frank Ramos, reliever we thought about picking back in 2040, went in a different direction, and he made his major league debut with Miami this year. 6-2 record, 42 saves, a brilliant 1.46 ERA, 108 strikeouts over 67 2/3 innings. Just an excellent rookie year for him. Probably going to get some Mariano Rivera Award votes in addition to some Rookie of the Year votes. Felt like he was a pretty high-end prospect. I know some of you thought we should even consider taking him with our first-round pick. We passed on him, and he looks like he's a really high-end reliever for many years to come, which is not unexpected given his profile. Luis Zapata, the last of the pitchers, first-round pick in 2040, 2-4 with an 8.44 ERA in rookie ball this year. The lefty does not look like he's got a big future as a pitcher. He was a potential two-way player. Still looks like he could be a useful-ish offensive player. Only had 6 at-bats in rookie ball this year and was 0 for 6, though. So other than the 2041 season, it doesn't look like the Detroit organization is aggressively trying to develop him as a two-way guy. A few position players as well. Guadalupe Amezcua, who was the main player in the trade that brought us our second baseman, Contreras. Spent this whole year in Double-A after briefly progressing to Triple-A a year ago. Hit just .210 there. Looking at his profile, questionable whether he'll ever be an everyday major leaguer. Honestly, it's questionable whether he'll even get a cup of coffee at the major league level, given that he's already 26 years old. Jafnell Cook, an infielder, is a guy we thought about in the first round this year. We're hoping he might drop to us in the second round. Looks like he was signed late by the Braves organization and did not end up playing any organized ball after his high school career ended this past season. Mike Yockey, another shortstop who was in this year's draft that we thought about taking instead of Ferguson, and it looks like he did not sign. So I think he's going to be back in the draft next year. Or Long Beach State he went to, so it may be a few years till Yockey is back in the draft. But a big fail by the Houston Astros organization not getting their top pick signed. And last but not least, Pat Moody, guy who was picked 3rd overall in 2041, just a really good-looking prospect. Number 2 prospect in baseball out of Texas, and he basically spent the entire season with Kansas City this year. Hit .313, 24 homers, 90 ribbies, 145 WRC plus as a rookie. The right fielder looks like he could be a extremely potent offensive force for many years to come. Already a fan favorite and a lot of positive personality traits as well. And with the review of our prospects and some other prospects now complete, time to hit the final goal of this episode, which is to visit in on some of our former players. Juan Estrada, who was a big-time two-way player for us for many years, left as a free agent. Or actually, we traded him away, didn't we? Yes, we traded him to the Red Sox for Jim Andrews, our shortstop, and some cash when he was going to be making really big money. After that, last year, he did sign as a free agent with Texas this offseason, or last offseason. 10-12 with a 3.92 ERA for Texas. Respectable season on the mound. Batting-wise, similar to what Boston did with him a year ago. He got a lot more action than he typically did with us. Hit .243 in 564 at-bats. Did have 41 doubles and 24 stolen bases. But overall, that 88 WRC plus he put up is the worst of his career. And the 105 that he put up with Boston a year ago, also one of the worst figures offensively of Estrada's career. So I think we probably moved on from him at about the right time, given the type of money that he's making. Ali Ostendorf, we saw in the playoffs with Atlanta, 12-7 with a 3.05 ERA. One of the better seasons of his major league career. Hard to believe that old Ali, who we picked 2nd overall many seasons ago, is going to be soon turning 34 years old. Drake Purvis, formerly a big-time starter for us. Looks like he's now being used out of the pen for St. Louis. Split the year between AAA Memphis and the big club. 3-0 record with a hold and a 3.90 ERA. Certainly at 36, closing in on 37 years old, is not what he was. $18 million for next season, and then a vesting option is a lot of money to be paying for a pretty average reliever. A lot more position players to talk about here. Jorge Berrios, a guy that we moved on from this past offseason, spent the entire year with Pittsburgh and kind of did what you would expect Jorge Berrios to do. The batting average was just 216. He did have 12 homers, and he walked 83 times, taking advantage of that great bat. That put his on-base percentage up to 347. So his OPS plus and his WRC plus were not too far off league average. Competent defensive catcher, put up a 1 WAR. We moved on from him just because we're looking for a better than competent defensive catcher, and we also didn't like some of the negative personality traits of Berrios in our clubhouse, but thought he would have a little pop in his bat and thought he could draw some walks, and at 27 years old, he certainly did that this past year. Andres Funky Cold Medina, formerly one of the top prospects in our system, one of the top prospects in baseball, still durable, still a great personality, still excellent defensively, and he still can hit some home runs with 16 this year, still strikes out a lot with 140 strikeouts, but the overall results with a 112 WRC plus and a 4.1 WAR earned Funky Cold Medina his 4th All-Star honor of his career this past season at the age of 34. Arturo Flores is a international amateur free agent we brought up through our system. Right-handed first baseman, just didn't think he was really a difference maker, and I think we've been generally proven right about that. He's gotten full season playing time ever since we traded him to the Angels. We had used him as more of a part-time player, but hit 211 this year, 19 homers, 75 ribbies, 84 WRC plus, negative win below replacement given his defensive limitations. So we always liked his personality and his durability. He's just not a difference maker as a baseball player. Shamar Jenneret, back in the day, was definitely a difference maker, but he's going to be turning 38 years old on Christmas Day in less than 2 months, and it looks like Father Time has finally started to catch up with the player who we won a couple of World Series with in 2034 and 2036, and he was the World Series MVP both of those years. Hit 249 with 18 homers for the Red Sox this year. Basically a league average type offensive player, slightly below replacement level given his defensive limitations. Looks like Mr. Jenneret is going to be a free agent unless the Red Sox sign him over the next few weeks. Steve Anderson was our shortstop for many years, had a monster season his first year with Washington a year ago after we let him go as a free agent, not really wanting to pay him $20 million a year. Got more of a typical Steve Anderson season this year. The batting average dropped almost 50 points to 253. Doubles dipped to 22, homers dipped to 15, still did drive in 77 runs, 89 WRC plus, respectable defensive player at this point, but not really a shortstop anymore, and you can see that the Nationals have moved him to third base. With the money he's making, the fact that he was fragile when we moved on from him, and his defensive skills regressing a bit already, I think it was probably a wise move not to give him big money. You can see he's still got 2 more years at over $20 million on the books and guaranteed with the Nationals. Joe Edwards, a guy who came up through our system, another guy who we let leave when he was set to make really big money. Hit 205 this year, 19 homers and 70 ribbies, a 90 WRC plus for the Red Sox. Always liked his ability to draw walks, and he did walk 89 times this year, but still not really a difference maker offensively. Joe Gallagher is a guy who we moved on from because of a lot of negative personality traits, pretty miserable defensive skills, very slow, but he is a guy who can hit home runs and draw walks. We signed him to a minor league deal this year, and he combined for 47 home runs between AA Utica and AAA Albany. He also struck out 152 times at those levels. We've still got him in our organization, his organizational depth, but unlikely that Navin Johnson will be promoted back to the major leagues anytime soon with us. Jorge Climaco traded him away a few years ago. He was also part of that Contreras trade along with Guadalupe Amezcua. He's been a 4A guy for the last several years with the Astros organization. Just 18 at-bats at the major league level this year. Did have 6 hits, so the batting average was .333. But all singles, no walks drawn, so his WRC plus was still below average. He's now 28 years old. Don't feel bad having moved on from Mr. Climaco. Last but not least, Mike Heiner, a guy who was a first-round draft pick of ours. We signed him to a long-term contract when he had little or no major league experience. And he's become a bit of a vagabond since we finally moved on from him in 2040. This past year, he spent time in the majors with both Boston and Washington, was an above-average offensive player with the Red Sox, and then he was traded to Washington right before the trade deadline, where he was a below-average offensive player, combined for 14 homers and 56 ribbies across those 2 levels. Looking at his profile now, he's pretty much a replacement level guy, and you can see he was a win above replacement with Boston, slightly below replacement level with Washington. And he is headed to free agency most likely again after this season. So Heiner, who won a Rookie of the Year award for us in 2033 and was an all-star each of his first 2 years, was a member of our first 2 championship teams, feel like we got the best years out of Heiner before we moved on from him in 2040. He was a important component of the trade that brought us Luis Coma-Duran, who is now one of our better offensive players. Also got us out of his contract, which wasn't horrible, but was starting to turn towards being a very mediocre contract. And he hasn't, unfortunately for him, done much the last 2.5 years since we parted ways with Mr. Heiner. And with that, we'll call it an episode. Next time around, we're going to begin the off-season in earnest. In the meantime, we're going to need to figure out exactly what to do with all of our arbitration-eligible players. Hopefully, once the off-season begins, we'll find out where we stand with Mr. Seifu in relatively short order. And then we do have some money to spend, so we're going to be taking a look at who the potential big free agents that are going to be available on the market are. And that will likely help us inform whether we want to potentially bring back a Mendoza or a Ramiro, or even possibly a Ruckel, a Miller, or a Houlihan. Can't say the door has been closed on any of those 5 players at this point, but with the money that they're looking for and the money that we have available, I think it would be very surprising if more than 1 or 2 of them were back with us next year. But once we get a better sense of what the potential free agent market actually looks like, that'll inform that decision. I guess rather than leaving a cliffhanger, I can just take a quick look at that right now. Pitching-wise, looks like there's a lot of high-end relievers, including Darnell Polite, who's on our team this year, potentially available. Our buddy Mendoza, one of the top starters out there. Pete McLaughlin looks like another pretty interesting starting pitcher out there as well. Ruckel is a reliever, so we've got some talent that's going to be hitting the free agent market as far as pitchers, not necessarily a huge need of ours. As far as batters, our catcher Houlihan, Shamar Jenneret, who we just talked about, are 2 of the higher rated, at least in terms of the always perfectly figured out star ratings that are going to be out there. Second baseman Daniel Correjo, like his speed, like his ability to make contact, like that he's an Iron Man, can play a number of positions defensively. He's probably a somewhat more useful offensive player than most of the middle infielders that we have, but he's also looking for about $25 million, so that could be hard. Jorge Valenzuela looking for $26 million. solid defensively, going to draw a lot of walks. He's been for the last 2 years a below average offensive player. So although I'm not necessarily in love with the bats of any of our middle infielders, as I talked about last episode, also not sure that Valenzuela at big money is the answer. You can see a lot of familiar names in the second tier of guys available: Bobby Bolig, Tim Gaglia, Walt Miller, Juan Romero, Seifu, who hopefully won't actually be hitting free agency. As we scroll down to a second page for you to see, if I could scroll properly to the second page, let you see some of the other bigger batting prospects who are going to be out there. And doesn't look at a very cursory glance like there's a lot of big impact guys that we'd be inclined to chase after. So from that perspective, I think it's maybe a little more conceivable that we decide to re-up with one or two of these pending free agents off our squad. I guess we could put Bolig, Polite, and Van Trahan in the mix there as well. But it's going to be a bit of a reloading year for our Buffalo Wings, with undoubtedly a significant number of departures off of our 40-man roster via free agency this coming offseason. And we'll start finding out the types of decisions that we're going to make and whether or not you view them as the right decisions in our next episode and the subsequent comments. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.